We are 1 minute after, so we'll go ahead and get going, and I'll continue to admit people as I welcome all of you. I'm Hannah Tester. I am your room host for this session, as well as I'll help facilitate the session as well. I'm the homeownership director at NeighborWorks Montana. I just have a couple of logistics to go through before we start up. We're excited you're here. We want to give special thanks to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines for sponsoring this session. Please make sure you mute your lines and use the chat function for questions. We're going to do our best to try to get to all of your questions today. We do have a really packed 90 minutes. So I will promise I will record questions in case we can't get to them at the end, but we're definitely going to do our best to get through all of them. Just a few housekeeping items. All sessions are being recorded. Please mute your lines and turn off your video while the presenters are presenting. Click the chat icon and select all panelists and attendees and enter your name, organization, and location. That way we can see who all is here. Still allowing people in. You can turn your video back on during Q&A time if you want to ask your questions live, or you can use the chat function to ask questions. Each of you should have received a whiteboard and paddle and a marker in the mail. If you find something inspiring, exciting, or new, write a quick adjective on the whiteboard. Hold it up and let us know during the Q&A time at the end of the session. Make sure I've admitted everyone. We're here today to discuss work and goals of a newly reinvigorated effort in Montana that is the Montana Homeownership Coalition. Through work and support of Fannie Mae, enterprise community partners, and the work of our consultant, Seven Sisters, as well as the commitment and work many leaders statewide, we've been able to spend the last 18 or so months organizing this coalition effort and aligning our statewide goals with the aim of reducing barriers to homeownership on tribal land in Montana. In February, we held an in-person strategic planning event, and we're able to come away from that event with an aligned vision for the next year or more. Today, we would like to discuss the results of that strategic planning session and to invite you all to join in this work. I would like to, before we dive in, I do want to turn it over to Tanya Plummer, Executive Director of the Montana Native Growth Fund, to introduce our prayer and thought leader for this session. Tanya?
Thanks, Hannah. Again, so good to see everybody. Thanks for using the chat to introduce yourselves. We've still got a few people trickling into the room, so that's wonderful. I would love to introduce to you today my dad. I don't know how many of you came to our session last year, but I shared with you some of his story by way of sharing some of the issues that we face in tribal communities in Montana. And so he is a pastor on the Fort Belknap Indian Community Reservation. He runs a camp for the tribe. And has done a lot of very good things, not only for natives, but specifically for Native children in our area. So Bruce Plummer, would you open us up today in prayer?
Oh, sí, Matawa. Bruce, Gilis Tonka, Mini, Nakota, Fort Belknap, Montana. I said my name is Bruce, Big Spotted Eagle. I from a Nakota tribe, a Assiniboine tribe. I live on the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. And first, before I pray, I just want to say Panamia, Konas, and that means it means thank you, my friends, for your willingness to look at the Native community and to assist us in a struggle that we've had for years to provide adequate housing on all of our reservations. And I'm sincerely from my heart want to say thank you for you guys for making us a part of what's going on. With that, let me just open up in prayer. This afternoon, Father, I dedicate my prayer to everyone here. I may not know what anyone is going through. I may not know the struggles each one here faces today. I may not know the battles they have won. I may not know the battles they have lost. What I do know is that prayer is powerful. Even though I may not know each one here personally, I'm still sending a prayer to our Father for each one here this afternoon. So, Father, I pray today is a great day for all attending this conference. I pray that each presenter would be able to share the knowledge that you have given them clearly. I pray today that all goes well in the life of each person here. Father, we would pray that each one of us could touch someone's life today. Father, I would pray that those in need of healing in their lives, I pray for those that the Lord blesses you and brings you peace in this crazy world that we're living in. Father, we take a moment to pause and pray for what's going on in Ukraine. We pray for each family that will lose a loved one in this life-taking conflict in Europe. Father, I pray that each one here would find some small happiness. Father, I would pray that no matter what each person is going through here today in their life, that they would not lose faith. I pray that each person here would not lose hope. Father, I pray for all the wishes and dreams of each person would come true. I pray that each person here would not forget how special and that needed they are in this world. I pray for each one of you climbing a mountain in your life and the top seems so far away. Father, it's in the name of Creator Sets Free, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, that we offer this prayer. My last comment I'll say is, Father, I pray in our language, I hope, may it be so. Thank you for taking the time to pray, folks, and I wish you well. And I thank you for each of your talents and abilities and your willingness to help the people, the average person in Montana, acquire a home, which is a dream for all of us. So Panamia, and which means thank you, Makonas, my friend. Aho. Amen.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Bruce,
you.
for those beautiful words. Thank you, Tanya. Let's see. The strategic planning event in Helena was well attended by a diverse group of stakeholders. This pie chart, you can see the background of the group that attended. You can see that we had a variety of perspective at that event. We spent 2 days together where we discussed barriers, challenges, as well as efforts that have already taken place historically. We do want to acknowledge that this is not a new effort, but a reinvigorated one. It's important to know what's been done so far, because that will inform our work moving forward. From the 2 days together, we came away with 6 smaller coalition working groups. Our panel today will discuss each of those, and we'll end with an opportunity for you to volunteer to join a working group if there's 1 or 2 that speaks to you. Before we dive in, I do want to turn it back over to Tanya to introduce a short video that encapsulates a lot of the motivation behind this coalition effort. Tanya, I wasn't sure if you had a couple words you wanted to say about the video before I play it.
Sure can. I sure can. It's really hard to relive what we experienced together in that time. I think it really was a truly beautiful event to have such a diversity of stakeholders all present in the same room and working together for one same purpose. And so we felt like this was the best method that we could use to convey to you what it was really like. And it still probably falls short of that. We'll share what our next events are. And for those of you that attended and have been a part of this or are just now learning about it, there's so much more that can and will be done in the very near future. And so by the end of the month, we will have emails out with very specific engagement times for every single working group. But today is to do a little bit of a recap and a little bit of a deeper dive into what we're trying to accomplish because we've laid out those priorities. So really happy to have the whole team here today, and we can go ahead and show the video, Hannah. Thank you.
Montana, our beautiful state, is home to a steadily increasing population of American Indians. 78,000 Native Americans now belong to 12 federally recognized tribes and reside on one of our 7 Indian reservations or in nearby rural and urban areas where housing can be found. Nationally, only 43% of American Indians are homeowners, compared to 71% of white Americans. Without the opportunity to build equity and create generational wealth, Native Americans hold only 8 cents of wealth for every dollar held by white Americans.
In Montana, our tribal communities still suffer the impact of crashed economies. Tribal funding falls short to meet the need, and very few homes are built or purchased. To restore a healthy balance of equity and opportunity for our Native populations, Montana needs more homes and more mortgage finance options for Native Americans.
A rising movement of difference makers has gathered across the state to fix the problem. We are Native-led and comprised of Native and non-Native professionals and practitioners, nonprofits and for-profits, banks and credit unions, CDFIs and tribal housing authorities, developers, and others, dedicated to improving homeownership opportunities for all of Montana's Indian population. We circle the entire state.
In early February, these stakeholders joined in a circle of solidarity around this cause and held a first strategic planning session. Hand in hand and marching to the beat of the same drum, the positive energy was almost tangible and spread quickly. Together, we took inventory of past efforts, discussed barriers and solutions, developed a practical vision for moving forward, and identified 5 key priorities to mobilize the vision. We begin to create form and focus, structure and strategy to the coalition, and we need your involvement.
Together, we can create equitable opportunities for Native homeownership across our great state. Now is the time to join us, to enrich your career, to give in reciprocity, to be a part of the positive change for all Native Montanans. Join the Montana Native Homeownership Coalition today.
Awesome. Love that one. All right, let me get my palette. Oops, sorry.
Montana, our beautiful
Make sure we're all muted. Awesome. Thank you for that, Tanya, and introducing that video and all the work that went into that. So we will dive into sharing our working groups. We do have, our panel is made up of leaders of those working groups. So up first to talk about our governance and organizational leadership working group is Rod Trahan, Executive Director of the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Housing Authority. So take it away, Rod.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and help with this conference and to gather more momentum for us. I really enjoyed that session that we had up in Helena, and it allowed us to clarify some of the I guess precepts that we were going to be formed upon. And one of the things, obviously, since it was a coalition, after we had kicked around all of the items that were out there and issues that needed to be addressed and whatnot, obviously it was, I guess it became evident that we needed further development in the organization of this coalition. So one of the things that was identified was we were going to formalize the structure of the coalition. And I think, again, that's in relation to just having a central area that would help to organize and push forward on the efforts, because if you don't have a leader, I guess things tend to go get pushed aside, and priorities don't always match up. So I think it's great that we're looking to formalize more structure there. And as part of that, we'll be looking at creating a decision-making structure by the third quarter. Just in getting to this point, I know that it's been a challenge in getting people's schedules lined up. So again, having that that organizational structure and creating that's going to be very helpful for us. In addition to that, we were looking at actually developing a coalition training plan to help the entities that would be coming to the coalition understand the differences between home ownership on the reservation and home ownership off, and helping them, not just the partners, but also anybody that would be applying for home ownership, helping them to understand the ins and outs of it, in addition to the structures that are slightly different or that vary whether you're on the reservation or off the reservation. I think the other thing that we had looked at is we were also looking to plan to get together by October 2022 as kind of like this, our next big meeting. And I guess that would be the third quarter of 2022. And that's, I want to say that was October, yeah, October. And again, with everybody's schedules and whatnot, we're looking to still continue to push forward because it's such a an item that we have to keep making progress one step at a time. So as part of that, looking to establish a board and hire an administrator at some point. I don't exactly recall what time frame that was, but as part of that administration, creating a board and hiring an administrator would be really critical to making things continue to move forward. As you can see by the bullet points, by fall of 2022, the coalition will be gathering a second time, and I mentioned that was I believe that was in October. We also wanted to establish focus groups based on the goals, and out of this meeting that we had in Helena, there were a number of different areas that had a lot of different directions to head to. And I think if we didn't establish this and I guess get this all in order and kind of itemize that, we'd perhaps be running around like chickens with our heads cut off. We were able to formalize this and at least get everybody grouped up and heading in the same direction, and providing a group effort in each of those areas. I guess the other thing is part of that we had looked at. I'm looking at a couple notes on the side is having the housing authorities, native housing authorities are in the process of completing a tribal housing needs assessment. And I can say from the perspective of the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Housing Authority here in Lame Deer, we are on board with that, and in fact are scheduled to kick off our needs assessment in the fall, perhaps August or September. Actually it was September of 2022, and I believe Salish Kootenai has already done a lot of that work as well and has completed theirs. So we're looking at having to develop that across the way, across all of the reservations. But in any case, it takes a strong organization and a sort of a leader to help further the cause, and that's what we're hoping to gather from this. And we can appreciate that it's a second time around, but we were able to, rather than reinvent the wheel, to draw upon the wisdom and the lessons learned from the previous efforts, and hoping to make this a stronger launch and in fact a very successful one. So that's all I have for my part of the presentation, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest.
Thanks, Rod.
Mm-hmm.
Our next working group is education and counseling, and we had invited Jody Perez, Executive Director at Salish Kootenai Housing Authority, to speak to this working group. But due to a family emergency, she was unable to join today. So I'm going to discuss this working group. I have facilitated NeighborWorks Montana's intermediary role as a HUD housing counseling and education grant for 8 years. And I was a housing counselor before that. So I have a little bit of a platform to be able to speak to this topic. Education and counseling is a working group because this coalition believes that education is vital to empowering individuals with all the tools and resources we can so that they can make sound financial decisions independently. The coalition agreed that this type of support needed to be a key focus, not only because it is so important, but because current systems have opportunity for improvement when serving Native communities. There's a lot of opportunity, but 2 opportunities in particular, I definitely wanted to point out today. And as I speak, you can see our bulleted list of goals for this working group. So the 2 opportunities I want to talk about today is one is a need for Native focused and individual tribe focused stories and curriculum. So the curriculum we know needs to be relevant to our Native communities. There are curriculum that exists that have started that work. So a base for this working group to jump off of exists. But we believe there's more work to be done before the language is able to better communicate with our Native homebuyers. The other systemic opportunity that we see in our education and counseling work is a need for HUD regulations to be more tribally inclusive. And so maybe some of you know in 2019, the Dodd-Frank Act mandated that in order to receive HUD funding for counseling services, and for those of you that don't know, HUD funding is the largest consistent pot of funding that's available for this education and counseling work. In order to have access to that funding starting in 2019, every counselor would need to take and pass a HUD exam and become HUD certified counselors. The exam is taxing and has proven difficult for all counselors nationwide to master, housing counselors who have been doing this work for many years. But it put an extra burden on our Native partners. Like a lot of federal policy, this certification requirement has affected tribal organizations disproportionately, specifically because of the content that the test focuses on. Native housing counselors are being asked to learn content that will not be applicable to their work moving forward, while their non-Native peers are not being asked to do the same when it comes to learning about home ownership on tribal land. In order to access this funding that supported a majority of their work, counselors working in Native communities are being put at a disadvantage at this point. HUD did host numerous listening sessions about this issue back in 2020, but since then, to my knowledge, no actual movement to change the policy has taken place. So this coalition is being tasked with finding other types of funding that can support Native partners in education and counseling efforts. And then again, you can see a list of our more specific goals on your screen right now. Our next working group is infrastructure and development. So to talk about that, to introduce Jacob Kuntz, Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity in Helena.
Thanks. Appreciate being here. Mark and I were honored to be invited to be part of that strategic planning event and to hear all the great work and the expertise and passion for this important work across Montana. So our organization has been doing more and more work in rural communities. Right now, we build in Helena, Montana, but we're also right now building in Red Lodge and use that as a pilot project for us to examine how our organization might work with rural communities throughout the state. in building housing where perhaps there isn't the capacity to set up the development process, infrastructure process, site acquisition, and then getting build groups in place to build homes. Our programs primarily focus around the USDA's 502 loan program and mutual self-help, where families work together to build each other's homes and work as a build group with everybody moving at the same time. But building the infrastructure issues, well, the entire house is a bit like an iceberg. The majority of the work is just below the surface, and so you're probably getting a clue of some of that here. There's a lot of different things that come into play before we ever break ground and get the houses coming out of the ground. So that is some of the things that we've learned quite intimately in the work that we've done in Red Lodge, and have started to look here as well. So there's a lot of these this thought bank working actively to identify the challenges and the barriers to building in different communities. Water and sewer infrastructure, identifying where the sewer goes, where the water is going to be coming from, how do we develop that, create density, what does that density look like? Existing zoning, covenants, building codes, learning all of this. Not everything is obviously transferable from community to community. When we walk into communities throughout the state, we're there with a learning mindset, trying to understand how things function, and then identifying where the resources are and where the gaps in those resources are, and where we need to get a better handle on things. And of course, it's not just the building part, the finances. You've noticed the education aspect of getting people prepared, working with appraisers and inspectors, and better understanding how to inspect homes, and then working with the different funding sources to be able to identify how are we going to access those, what are the barriers in the way of those funding sources to be able to get infrastructure and the type of development underway, roads and the like, so that we can get homes constructed. So all these things have to be being done simultaneous. And really, when we're looking at things, we're oftentimes examining the low-hanging fruit. Where is the easiest place to develop, to create a project so that we can model it and show it off, and then bring people along, something that we can point to. Oftentimes these things are so abstract. You're reading these as bullet points on a page, but every single one of these elements has a tangible impact in communities. So creating a project that we can point to and use as an education tool for the community, and identify through those projects what were the challenges, what were the issues that we faced, and how do we work through those challenges to make the process easier the next time. The most beneficial part of any kind of infrastructure or development work is repetition and getting into a habit and being able to replicate things. And so some of these things we're talking about, the relationship and talking about projects and using the different funding sources, is critically important, and bringing people along in the process so we're not starting over at zero every time we look at developing the next parcel of land. And I think, as part of this, where you see in here the, building codes, examining what are the tribal building codes, what is the tribal zoning, are there updates that are needed, are there uniform codes that are needed, something that we can find elsewhere. Has there been a place that have put things in place that we can bring and we can replicate in Montana to help us navigate the process easier? And then ultimately, this all comes down to the money. Of course, where does the money come from? How are we blending these different resources to make sure they're talking to one another and removing the barriers that might be in the way? Not from any kind of nefarious reason. Oftentimes it's just because they haven't been used in a certain way or in a certain place. And oftentimes we just have to walk people through that. So everything that we do, and I will stress at the bottom of this, comes down to patience, education, being patient with a process, identifying what is the easiest place that perhaps we can get a project going, and then who are the partners who are willing in a spirit of education and moving toward a future where things are able to be built more actively. We're willing to step through challenging topics one at a time, working through issues so that we can develop the infrastructure in the neighborhoods that conform with the community, that benefit the community, and that can be replicated down the line. So that's something that we've learned in our work. Sometimes it is a hard, painful process, and other times it is life-giving and feels joyful. And the end result of both the hard parts of development and the joyful parts of development is our singular goal of making sure that families, individuals have decent, affordable places to call home. So, and that makes it worth it. All the challenges that lie in the way of that final product and that opportunity to hand over the keys to a new home. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Our next working group will be introduced by Tanya Plummer. She'll discuss the work of our financing working group. Tanya.
Hello, everyone. I think this is often the section that folks think of most when they think of providing homeownership opportunities is, how do I get a loan? What loans are available? And I hope you're starting to appreciate more and more and more that it is a much, much bigger conversation. This topic, it really is one specific working group with so much that needs to be done in its smaller scope alone, on top of the education pieces on homeowner education and building social emotional infrastructure, educational infrastructure for folks to be able to even get to the point where they can qualify for a mortgage. In our session, this was one of the most interesting portions because the groups that were there spent a lot of time hammering down on, do we lean into products that are available right now? Do we not reinvent the wheel, or do we take a sidestep and create something totally new and different because what's existing isn't working right now? And I think we came to both. We need to focus on both avenues. We have Fannie Mae, who is funding and at the table helping us with a lot of this work, willing to consider ways that they can get products in our communities. But we also have a number of other smaller banks and community institutions, credit unions, and CDFIs that have the ability to be creative about creating products. The biggest thing I think is mobilizing lenders and investors to get together and understand the barriers that we face on Montana's tribal trust lands and how we can overcome them. We see this coalition environment to be one of a bridge builder where we can connect tribal communities and those who are on the ground doing the work with banks and other lenders and try to find a way to create more mortgage financing opportunities there. One, we had to visit with Montana financial institutions about designing a portfolio product that could be implemented on tribal trust lands, but at the same time working with USDA on potentially creating new products or revising some of the things that are available. And there's a reason we've not had any of those loans on trust lands. There's a reason less than 10% of HUD 184s are on tribal trust lands. There's a reason there's been no new homes built at Fort Belknap specifically since the mid-90s. There just are not products available. And the ones that are available are not working. They're broken and they need to be fixed. So this is a great chance for us to pull this team together with engagement across the state to create these new opportunities. Part of it is an education piece, and just in terms of familiarizing tribes with what is available out there that might be an avenue and what lenders they can talk to connect their homeowners. And so, I think we do have some Montana lenders who can do a HUD 184 loan. We do have a couple packagers, but again, we haven't had any USDA loans on tribal trust lands. So we're getting there, but it's just an education piece where we can create those products, fix what's broken, and then get the word out. Other things that this particular working group can focus on that could potentially be barriers to mortgage lending is, what do the tribal mortgage lending codes look like? Can we hold an Indian law clinic and bring in some folks who know this world really well and help each tribe look at its tribal lending code, make whatever revisions are necessary, and create an environment conducive to MOAs that are necessary with larger lenders, with the GSEs and with the federal agencies, so that we can move forward in a way that both parties are comfortable and we understand what's happening, and feel like our land is protected. We could host a lender gathering with lenders across the state and learn a little bit more about their products and have them learn a little bit more about what it's like working in Indian country. We could inventory existing policies. Many of our smaller organizations don't have lending policies and can learn a lot from our larger agencies. Talking about new products, can we do a pilot lending product with our CDFIs? We've got 5 or 6 native CDFIs between those who are certified and those who are emerging, who are doing excellent work in our communities. What can we pilot through their work and the cohesiveness that we see there? Looking at other tribal, state, and federal policy issues and how those things can be impacted to help remove some of the barriers for us. And then looking at doing an individual mapping of the leasing to closing process for each tribe. We really were trying to be specific about timeframes to make sure that we're focused in the work that we're doing. But I know that's one thing. We've looked at a neighboring organization in the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition, and they've been able to map out what that leasing process looks like for each tribe, and it's a little bit different for each tribe, and post that. But that's helpful for those who are on the ground working. It's helpful for tribal members to review, and it's helpful for lenders to see what they're getting into and how to navigate the process. So again, so much that each working group alone can be working on. That would be the long and short of the financing group.
Thanks, Sonia. Next up, I'd like to introduce Jason Adams, owner and consultant with ACE Housing and Development. Jason's going to talk to us about the work of the Tribal Leadership and Engagement Working Group.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be involved today and be a part of this. For those that know me, I've been with the Salish Kootenai Housing Authority for a lot of years and worked, not only here within the state, but regionally and nationally on Indian housing issues. And so, I was involved with housing for 26 plus years and have a lot of information in regards to, the issues that we've dealt with over those years. So when I was asked to be involved and participate in the strategic planning for the coalition, the new effort, I looked back and made sure everybody understood that the history here is there's a long history in regards to the efforts here in the state of Montana with the tribes in the state of Montana for the coalition work of some work around home ownership efforts for the tribes. And that goes back to 2 previous efforts that I'm aware of that I was involved with there was a Montana Homeownership Network effort that was done back in the late 90s that then engaged the tribes about 1999, led into the 2000s. And that then transitioned over to what is now NeighborWorks Montana and the efforts there. That was part of what was going on in really trying to get an effort and some work done on home ownership for the whole state of Montana. And tribes were a piece of that. And there was a lot of good work done through those years. Really, the efforts there back in those days led to the creation of a lot of home ownership education programs for tribes, and not only tribes, but the coalition work that was done was by all the folks involved. They went out and did a lot of work on reservations, kind of opening up those doors to help folks understand that homebuyer education was a real need for Indian communities. Then from that, there was an effort through a bunch of the tribes, and mainly that was through the housing authorities for the tribes. There was a bunch of tribal housing folks that came together and created a coalition back in about 2008, 2009. And that was pretty active for about 5 or 6 years. And that really then, we were again picking up where the previous effort kind of left off and doing a lot of home buyer education work and helping individual housing programs. And again, it was mainly housing authority driven, housing authority staff engaged, board of commissioners. So one of the things that I just wanted to give that history because it kind of leads to where the work begins with the coalition as we are today, the Montana Native Homeownership Coalition, and the new effort that's been taken on. What we went to the table there, and as we talk today, we are speaking from the strategic planning session that happened in February. Really, that effort, and when we came to the table there, it was acknowledged that we always got to make sure that we have our tribal leaders engaged, our tribal leaders present, our tribal leaders informed of what's going on. And so that was, as we went through the process, the process was very well done, I thought, and been through several of these processes with different organizations over the years. And the folks that led this effort really need to be acknowledged because they did a great job. Commonalities with these processes, organizational history and, some of that work that was done really then showed, and started to tell that this history of what's been going on with home ownership and also some of the struggles that have been there. So early on, we acknowledged, that there was tribal leadership issues come up all the time, and educating, informing, involvement of tribal leadership, getting their buy-in, because we're dealing with sovereign nations here within the state of Montana, and those governments, those leaders have to be engaged. We have to acknowledge them. We have to help them understand, what the effort is, and also educate in regards to what the opportunities are with, helping folks become homeowners, because that lessens the strain on the whole homeownership opportunity, or homeownership, or housing opportunities for each tribe. And so by doing that, we acknowledge that all of the difference that is going on with all of the different tribes in the state, the different successes they're having, the different struggles they're having, really trying to understand and put our arms around this idea of, how can we build a coalition that is flexible and pliable enough that we can encompass all of these opportunities and efforts that are needed by the tribes within the state of Montana. And then, we also want to make sure we always acknowledge the tribal leadership and their direction, so that we don't get ahead of them and make sure that we aren't moving in a direction, that they wouldn't want us to be moving in. So then we acknowledge, the different paces that the tribes are moving in. No two tribes are doing this the same way. No two tribes have the same structures in place to make all these things happen. And then, the coalition was really looking at an opportunity to create an organization that stands ready to assist, and build capacity, and then, be hands-on, even in some cases, if need be. And so all of this, falls behind the efforts of that we acknowledged, and where we really need our tribal leadership at the table was when we start talking, and I think Tanya touched on this already, when we start talking about especially trust land issues, at the organizational levels, there can be a lot of efforts made to do some things there, but without the engagement and leadership of our tribal leaders to really focus in on those efforts, those things don't really move. And so trust land is a pretty significant barrier in some cases that has to be overcome and be understood and taken a look at. And then also, just the opportunities that are available with long-term planning issues. When we start looking at long-term planning, we want to make sure that, those are the efforts that can withstand the change in tribal leadership. Once you have a firm long-term plan in place, and then, that withstands leadership of councils and others involved, even administrations that change in some cases fairly often. So as we walk through the process, we started looking at the visioning, looking out, what could this coalition do, and some of the things there, how tribes can exercise. That was a good opportunity to really get a good feeling of what tribes can exercise their authority and what that looks like when we start looking out, 10 years down the road. The interesting thing that came out of that process was that, it all kind of centered around getting control of the land. As you look through the strategic planning document, that's really the thing that jumps out to you on that effort of looking out 10 years out is really that tribes have to have that opportunity to get that control, get that mechanisms in place so that, they have the opportunities to control those things, because those are the things that are, for a lot of tribes, are outside their control. And that is a huge barrier to home ownership for tribes, utilizing the HUD 184 program, utilizing USDA programs. All of those things always come up against the same barrier of land and land issues and land title status reports and all of those things that, for the most part, a lot of tribes don't have in their control. And so it's interesting, as we went through the process, that was really, how do tribes get that control and exercise their authority in those areas. So as we move forward, we start looking then again at the strategy, and we come to the bullet points that are on the screen, taking a look at, getting out there, having some meetings with our tribal leaders and developing a plan, really, helping them help us walk through this process on what we want to take a look at as far as a plan for the coalition to move, engaging with our tribal leaders as we move this effort forward. Again, because no two tribes are the same, no two tribes have the same issues. And so we want to make sure that we're able to be moving at the pace that they need us to be moving at. So again, convening a tribal leaders forum, later this year, working with what exists today, the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council, that's in place now, setting up an opportunity to work hand in hand with them as we work on these issues. And then, expanding our steering committee to include tribal leaders. We want to do that. Then Hearth, there's the act out there that some tribes have capitalized on and are utilizing now, Hearth Act, and making that available, and helping lead that effort again to get an opportunity out there for all tribes to grab that and utilize that, take advantage of that. Again, that will lead to more control of land issues back home. And then again, sharing coalition goals with tribal entities, as we grow the coalition and share the opportunities that we can work with, helping make sure that tribal leaders are informed and are a part of this work as we move forward. So with that, I think that kind of covers, where the tribal leadership engagement has been and where we're headed. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Finally, our sixth and final working group is marketing and outreach. We'll hear from Dustin Baird, the chair of the Physical Issues Committee for the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition. He's going to talk to you about the work on this working group.
Well, they were right on the river, weren't they? Yeah, I'm listening now.
Oh, I thought Nancy was gonna present for us, but she backed out. How mi dakiapi, mato hitikilamielo, nama Lakota, Ironclaw Tiochwe, Chante Weste Nape, choose Papalo. Hello, my name is Dustin Baird. I'm the Native American Housing Program Officer here at Enterprise Community Partners, and I do co-chair the Physical Issues Committee in South Dakota, as Hannah has stated. One second, I'm having issues with my screen here. Okay, so we'll start with the June campaign. So June is Native American Homeownership Month, and right now we currently, as a coalition, as a Montana Native Homeownership Coalition, we do not have a campaign of our own going, but we have partners who are doing campaigns in their own communities throughout Montana, and we're very supportive of what they're doing. But next year we will definitely have a campaign spearheaded by this group. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about what's happening in South Dakota for homeownership month. So last week we just celebrated last year's success in South Dakota with 23 new homes, 7 new renovations, $397,035 of subsidies were provided for these loans, 89% on reservation and 11% off reservation, with loan types of the USDA's 502 Direct, Veterans Affairs Native American Direct Loan, the USDA's 502 Relending, and the HUD 184 loan. Between the years of 2019 and 2021, the 502 Relending program was operated through 2 Native CDFIs, and they made 20 loans totaling $313,76, all on reservation and all tribal members. And in total, through those years, with combined efforts, 48 new Native homeowners have moved their families into their own place. And I wanted to highlight that success because it's what we want to replicate here in Montana. And we will have stories like that for you. So creating a website and using social media to identify and invite financial sponsors and communicate trainings and policy impact work. So this is another item of the goal setting of the coalition, and we are looking for Native firms to complete this work for us. We envision this website to include the mission statement of the coalition, telling the public what we are about, the working groups and their focus areas for anyone to see what is currently happening within each group, news and events of what's happening for the coalition, such as our in-person meeting in Helena back in February, as well as partners and issues of current affairs in Indian housing that would affect Montana tribal members. It will also include resources and information, including documents like the leasehold flowchart that Tanya was talking about earlier, and others such as the home building process flowchart for tribal members who are interested in home ownership, and also homeownership practitioners, both tribal and treaty partners. I refer to the non-natives who are helping us out as treaty partners, like my boy Charlie Brown from Montana Homeownership Partnership. So next we have College Montana Tribe and TDHE to support the bills 331 and 2902. There's some work that has been shifted. There's been some shifts in those bills, and I don't feel comfortable talking about this. So I'm going to lean on Tanya Plummer to talk a little bit more about those 2 bills.
Thanks, Dustin. This is really an exciting area where I think a coalition like this can come together and make much greater impact. We've already begun to do that a little bit with our partners in the state of South Dakota. So I'll give just a high-level overview of these 2 going forward. So Senate Bill 2902, and there is a companion House bill, and I cannot remember what it's labeled right now, was specifically to expand a USDA pilot program that was very successful in the state of South Dakota. What happened is USDA has funds to spend in persistent poverty communities, and every year they were struggling with getting those funds out. And so 2 Native CDFIs, was really piloted by Elsie Meeks in the state, said, we can do that for you, partner with us, and we'll get that out. And so they decided to design a pilot program where instead of redistributing that $2 million nationally, they lent it and gave it to 2 Native CDFIs who had, I don't remember what number, about 20 mortgage loans out in no time. There have been 0 defaults on any of those mortgages. All the money has been allocated with an existing pipeline of more that they could do. So Senate Bill 2902 is to make that program national and provide support and resources for Native CDFIs across the country to do the same thing by partnering with USDA, because as Native CDFIs, we're the ones on our community that understand the issues on the ground. We understand those leasing processes and all the nuances that go with it, that to Hannah's point, that HUD counselors outside our tribal communities don't necessarily understand. So recently, one shift is that President Biden wrote some appropriations into a bill for that project. So we're not sure right now whether it will go the way of passing the bill or going the appropriations route, but we're leaning into both. And the idea is that we could just continue to provide more opportunities for mortgage financing in tribal communities. Senate Bill 3381 was, I think, passed through committee without a hitch, any problems at all. It moves on to the House now, where it will need to maintain, I believe, unanimous support there. It is leaning specifically into reform at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So several of our partners on the call talked, I think, Jason, you talked the most about trust land issues within a tribal community and how many barriers it can create, because we don't have a private title company on the reservation. Our title company has no competition, and there's been very little accountability to enforce timely responses, so that you can get even a TSR to guarantee a loan and make it work. The timeframes are just insane. The CEO of the tribal enterprise at Fort Belknap shares often that it took 26 months to get a HUD 184 loan on his home and get a final certified TSR, which it doesn't create an environment conducive to secondary markets. The lenders can't be profitable, so they pull out, and then we don't have any products available to us. So there's been a number of things happening within the Department of Interior to help streamline processes. One of them being the Hearth Act and that options that are provided to tribes over the last, I'll share a little bit, the last little bit here. Fort Belknap has been the first large rural land-based tribe to pass the Hearth Act, and they're working through implementation and 2 competitive IHBG grants for acres and acres of new residential development. Salish Kootenai years ago were trailblazers in terms of contracting LTRO services. And so they manage the recording of all of those mortgages and TSRs and things like that. And so together, if we could combine forces, it would be incredible. So we've had conversations about exactly that over the last couple of months. And the point being, there are resources available, but it has to be a collective effort. You know, we cannot do this in silos. We've got to come together and share the wealth of knowledge and information and impact with other coalitions across the country to make this work come true for all of us. So high level overview of those 2 bills. Dustin, pass it back to you.
Appreciate that, Tanya. So next,
hang on, Dustin. Look in the chat, everyone. Joanna, do you want to share that a little bit?
I can just, sure, Tanya, just to build on what you already said, is that the president's budget included a line item for the native relending pilot, and which is great because that was proposed by the administration. But what's really cool now is that the House Ag Appropriations Chairman's Mark just came out, and it included a line item for 502 relending. It's not what we asked for. We asked for 50 million, but it's in there, which is fantastic. It's $12 million in funding to take the pilot nationwide. So now we have to move on to the Senate to make sure it's in the Senate language, and then of course see what happens when the actual final appropriations are enacted.
Great, thank you so much, Joanna. Okay, now we'll pass it back to you, Dustin.
okay, thanks for that update, Joanna. Joanna always finds a way to make the present sound. We appreciate it. Okay, so creating a marketing campaign around success stories. We've already started this work with the video in the beginning of this presentation by Tanya and some other guy, but that event included representatives from 5 reservations, 2 native CDFIs, 2 non-native CDFIs, 4 lenders, 2 state agencies, House and Commerce, the USDA, Montana Healthcare Foundation, 8 nonprofits and housing counselors. Great variety in all in collaborative spirit, which is empowering for me to get to interact with great influential people with a collective zeal around the mission. And we would like to see more involvement from TDHs and tribes. As Jason pointed out earlier, you know, we recognize the importance of tribal leader involvement to move this forward. So that is about what I have for my portion. So I'll hand it back to Hannah Tester.
Thanks,
Thank you
Dustin.
for coming to be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that marketing and outreach is really a lot of, not only marketing and outreach, but a focus on some of that policy work too. So thanks, Dustin and Tanya and Joanna. Before we move on with our slides, Tanya and I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you the strategic planning document that was created after our February event. And I can share this as well after the session with everybody who's on it, if you're interested in looking. But Tanya, did you want to talk through this a little bit, let everybody know what's in there?
Sure. I'll kind of just maybe just skim through, and I'll kind of try to hit the high points. There's so much, guys, so much that we covered while we were there, and so much work to do. We really put forum and focus to what this group can accomplish together while we were there. So you can just kind of see as we're going through the huge scope of work that we covered. I guess I'll just talk about it each one a little bit, Hannah. The history, we did take some time to inventory where we've come from. Jason gave appropriate acknowledgement to, I want to say, the forefathers of this movement, but some of the godfathers of tribal housing have done incredible work to pave the way for more opportunities leaning forward. So hopefully we can build on that and do a lot more together. We literally broke down over the last few years some of what we have seen, a lot of it being COVID related, to create the environment that we're in right now. Took a lot of basic data from what we know to be out there, and also spent some time looking at some of the positive trends. I think one thing that we acknowledged in the group is that in a session like this, the temptation to lean on everything that's going wrong is really high. Because it's hard work. And we have to protect our ability to remain solutions focused. And so while there's value in listing out the struggles and the barriers that we have faced, the greater value is in spending time on solutions. And so let's take an inventory. This is what we did on what are our recent accomplishments? What have we done that's been right to move things forward that we can expand or do better and provide to more folks working in Indian housing across the state. We really wanted to develop a practical vision and not just talk about what we wanted to do, but actually do it. And so that led to this next work that's coming up here. This process of coming to consensus right here, go ahead and pull back to that one, Dana, those vision statements right there. This was heavy work. I don't know, some of you who were there, I don't know if you remember what this was like, but we took a lot of time together to come to consensus on what was our vision statement for each one of these areas. And so these are really important. I think these are almost like guiding posts for the work that we are leaning into doing. We probably, maybe I'm thinking out loud, Hannah, need to find a way to get these sort of guideposts out to everybody, just to remind us perpetually that this is the deep work that we're focusing on. So we can keep going. Really, all of this is a breakdown. Those bullet points are a breakdown of what each one of those vision statements looks like and what we would see if we were to achieve that vision. Some of the contradictions, some of the issues that we faced, we had to identify those kind of by way of a SWOT analysis. And then this, swirl of everything that we identified as becoming an issue, and where do we need to start to focus most, and that really was that in that inner circle, that focusing on the BIA, those policies first, and working our way out, resolve those issues. I guess one way we've equated it, and we teach this in our homeownership class too, as Plains Indians, our traditional lodge was a teepee, and it was mobile because our economy required us to be mobile. We chased the buffalo. And here I go, Dustin, I'm going to bring hunting into this. We worked together to hunt. We worked together to go out and scout and look for what we could bring in to feed our people. And we moved. As the West was won and our economies were crashed, we no longer needed to be mobile, and our homes have changed. But there's a lot of value in looking at the structure of our teepees and how they were set up. We would name those poles. And so a lot of times we teach that we name the poles as the C's of credit. You know, so you've got, sometimes we would name as a story or an individual that was important in our lives. So when we teach homeowner education, we teach that those poles are one of the C's of credit. And we begin to, I guess, just kind of break down the barrier that we're not talking about equity building and making money through home ownership. We're talking about stability and things that we've not experienced as tribal people for a long time. I don't want to ramble. I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but look, this is an important slide right here because this broke down, really go back up to that one, Hannah, the priorities. Yeah. So this was sort of our critical breakthrough. So if we're going to make this happen, if we're going to accomplish what we want to accomplish, the first and foremost to break through is we've got to formalize our operations and to bring some structure to this group. And it's definitely taken us a little bit of time to do that. And I'm so grateful for the participation we've had so far and for your patience while we have taken this huge scope of history and information and a huge scope of what needs to continue to be accomplished to put that form and focus to it. So Rod, you did a great job of covering what our governance committee will do from this point forward by formalizing our structure. And I put in the chat, I think Gina was saying, hey, I'm RCAC, what can we do? You can all expect very specific communication no later than the end of the month with what specific next steps will be for each priority. So our working groups are designed around these priorities, these 5 right here. And this is our goal. So governance committee will really take over that first one, breaking through, and then you can see how they're broken up. Yeah, let's go ahead and move forward. Yeah, task force is the next step. We're moving on. And then we've got down here kind of a breakdown of each of the sessions that you just heard Rod and Jason and Dustin and Hannah talk about. We will be providing this implementation sheet right here, these 2. Every working group will get those 2 sheets where each group will sit down and break down the goals and what that group wants to accomplish, how they're going to accomplish, and list it out. So it's very specific and very focused, and we'll gather together as a larger group and continue to move forward. So it's a big document. It's hard to share it with all of you. We can send it by email again out to everybody, but wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. Hannah, I'll pass it back to you.
Yep, I'll make sure everyone gets that. So as kind of our last step today, I don't see any questions in the chat yet, so definitely make sure you're putting those questions in the chat if you have any. But I do want to tell you all sort of what the next immediate action items are for this coalition. One is we definitely want to invite all of you to that October event that Rod was talking about. It'll be October 3rd through 5th in Billings. We're going to have Seven Sisters. So you heard from Joanna from Seven Sisters come and teach a class on partnering with Native organizations. We're engaging in some other things that potentially will take place during that time as well. So we will have next steps for that is going to be registration will come out as soon as we're able to, and we'll invite everyone who's on this session to that event. So that's a next step for the, and it'll be our next coalition gathering. So our next opportunity for the coalition to gather together in person. The other next step is going to be meetings of our working groups. Oops. So as Tanya mentioned, before the end of June, we will have meeting invites for each one of our working groups sent out to everyone who is wanting to join. So I will invite you all to use this QR code, or I will put a link to this survey in the chat. And this survey will allow you access to join a working group that is of interest to you. There's a question in the chat about sharing the homeownership resource guide with the coalition and provide opportunity to be listed. Yeah, I can get that to you, Kathy. So if you either use that link in the chat or scan this QR code with your phone, you'll be taken to a survey that's just going to ask for some contact information as well as some that you might have, which you're wanting to join. From there, we will gather lists of everyone who's wanting to join working groups. And like Tanya said, before the end of the month, we will send out those invites. The action item that's not being, that is sort of a partnering, the coalition is partnering in this effort along with Montana Healthcare Foundation is a needs assessment. Rod also briefly talked about the needs assessment, and I'm wondering if Cassie, if I can put you on the spot to talk about that needs assessment a little bit.
Yeah, you sure can. Hi, everybody, and thanks everybody for sharing all this wonderful information. So Montana Healthcare Foundation, we are a funder, a healthcare funder, but we recognize the importance of housing is healthcare. So we have an initiative here at the foundation for that. So we are partnering with you all to see which tribes are wanting to explore this, and we can work with you to hire a consultant. So we just did this with Salish Kootenai, and it's going really well, like Rod said. And then we're working with Rod as well. And so if any other tribe is interested in doing a needs assessment, we can help you with that and hiring a consultant and partner with other entities to cover the cost for that.
Thanks, Cassie. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that's entirely tribally led. And the Montana Healthcare Foundation is just doing a really great job in trying to incorporate all Montana tribes in that effort so that we have consistent data statewide to support.
If I can, I want to add just a little bit to that too, because it's been such a big effort, you know, with just some incredible work. But I want to also kind of like broaden the scope of it a little bit, because the key stakeholders that are kind of leading that effort, it's, I think, a little bit more than even just individual tribal nations doing needs assessments. There's a connectivity to all of it, to that data and the assessment of that data. And I believe there's been engagement and conversation with the state of Montana, with others about, under partially funding, but also supporting that work and getting the word out, because this is a state problem. It's not just a tribal nation's problem. It's across our entire state. We have 50% probably of almost every Indian nation has 50% of their membership living off reservation because there's no homes there. And so the concept that we all have to care about Indian housing matters. We've got a lot of natives who are living in Billings and Great Falls and other areas because there's just no housing on the res. And so it's a bigger topic than just what's happening within those tribal nations. And it's just so important to meet both of those needs. There's a conversation of trust land issues and what's happening on the reservation, but also reaching the needs of Native Americans who are living in urban areas and the unique barriers that they face there too. So I'm looking at this statewide housing needs assessment for Native Americans to be really a big tool that can help us understand what's really happening, give some solid data to the picture of what we know is happening, that can help us bring in the funding, ideally, that's necessary to solve the problem. So
awesome. Thanks, Tanya, and thanks, Cassie. for letting me put you on the spot there. And I don't see any questions in the chat. We can let you all head out 15 minutes early unless anybody else on our panel wanted to add anything last minute, or anyone wants to ask a question out loud instead of putting it in the chat.
And I would say even not just ask a question, but just share your work. And if you have work that touches Indian country and maybe you're considering plugging in some way, we'd love to hear from you there too.
Yep. I'm Ermina Harold, Director of Trust Montana, statewide CLT Community Land Trust. And I think there might be some similarities with what we do with land trust home ownership. And I'm really excited to try to get engaged and try to teach what we've learned through all of our time trying to fix a lot of problems. So thank you for today.
Thanks, Ermina.
If it's possible, I'd like to call on a member of the audience, and they're not expecting it, but I'm hoping that they're okay with that. But I would love to hear from Benjamin Navarro with Fannie Mae. He's been, I think, pretty very, very open and welcoming about talking to our tribal nations, understanding what's happening in Montana, and being a leader and helping create new opportunities. So Benjamin, would you be willing to share with us today?
Sure, Tanya, happy to speak. As you noted, I haven't prepared anything, so please bear with me if I ramble a little bit. I suppose I'll start with sharing a little bit about how I come to this work. So I work for Fannie Mae, and under our broad umbrella of ESG work, environmental, social, and governance, we have a number of different activities that are aimed at addressing underserved populations of both homeowners and renters. I think largely today we'll talk about the homeownership side. So specifically, one of the things that drives my work serving this population is a concept that comes from Congress called duty to serve. So duty to serve is a law that was passed by Congress that said Fannie and Freddie, I just work for Fannie, must do more to serve various populations, including Native Americans. So that's turned into this regulation. And for anybody curious, you can see exactly what Fannie Mae has signed up for over the next 3 years if you go to our website or to fhfa.gov. And that outlines the different steps we're going to take to try to improve our role in bringing our products to Indian country. Most specifically, with folks on the call today, what we're really trying to pursue is more conventional lending on tribal trust land. So we have had a product for a few years now where so long as you have certain things in place, an MOU with a tribe and a lender that understands how to do lending on reservation, Fannie Mae can sort of make special accommodations to provide a conventional loan on tribal trust land. And it's been around for a few years, but it's very small. We do a relatively small volume of loans, and we want to try to grow that, namely by finding new tribes and new lenders that are interested in working with us to make that happen. There's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. The MOU is it's a legal document which requires review by counsel of both sides, and then also approval by tribal council. So it takes a while to get up and running, but our hope is that once more of this is going, we'll grow the product. We'll have more tribal trust loans coming to Fannie Mae. At no point do we think we're going to be the dominant option here. I think that there are government loans that can work, but we think that Fannie Mae can be a good option. There are certain borrowers who, just given their circumstances, they might be better off with a conventional loan than a government loan. The flip side is also true, but in certain cases, namely somebody who might have to pay mortgage insurance, the mortgage insurance situation with Fannie Mae is often advantageous. So we just want to get out there and work with folks like you on this call to see what the opportunities are, to pursue MOUs and to eventually bring in lenders and then eventually have Fannie Mae provide liquidity on reservation. I said I'd be rambling, sorry about that. But Tanya, does that sort of get at what you were hoping to hear?
I think that's great. Thank you so much for jumping in there.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks,
And I
Benjamin.
guess just the last thing I'll say is to plug our work. Sorry. If anybody's curious, wants to dig in a little bit more, my mailbox is open, so please shoot me an email. It might be available here, but I'll just tell people it's Benjamin_Navarro, Navarro @fanniemae.com.
Thanks, Benjamin. Anyone else want to share reflections?
I think we could probably go ahead and close up and give everybody an extra 10 minutes before their next session with the Housing Partnership Conference.
Awesome. Well, then I will do my room host closeout speech. Thank you for joining us. This concludes our day together. You can join an in-person networking event from 4 to 5:30 this evening. Check the conference website for more information on where those are taking place. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at our plenary session at 9 a.m. Thanks all for joining. Have a good day.